Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Anda sedang menonton rakaman agenda Awani khas dan saya berada di PICC sebenarnya di sisi satu persidangan yang begitu penting, IACC, melihat kepada bagaimana kita menentang rasuah di peringkat global. Oleh itu saya ingin minta izin berbicara bahasa Inggeris. I would like to welcome my guest for today, Ravindran Devagunam, the Director for NKRA for Fighting Corruption, and I guess it's very apt on the sideline of this particular conference. I guess looking as a whole, where Awani has been discussing this since it first started 8.5 years ago, there's a lot of things to look at when the moment you say that you want to fight corruption. There's the legal framework, there's also the practical framework, there's also the awareness and perception. Then if you go off on the other side, people say, no. At the end of the day, it must be about integrity in everyone involved. So I guess if I can take 2 steps back, look at the whole thing as an NKRA initiative, and look at Pemandu as an agency driving the fight, how would you like to see it from your point of view, especially when we know that it's so complex, but Pemandu has proven that before. I thought public transport was so complex, but you guys came in and put, things are put into perspective for going against corruption. And we know the moral standing point on this. We know the urgency of delivering on this, because there's no point raising our GNI and GDP so high, and yet it doesn't go down to the people who need it the most.
Correct.
So how do you paint, first of all, the picture of this, and what would we, the people, be having to feel good about from what that has been achieved?
I guess if you take the structure around fighting corruption within Pemandu, we take 4 different aspects. One is we look at enforcement agencies, we look at government procurement, we look at education and community outreach, and we also look at what we call grand corruption. Right? So those are the 4 basic categories that we work on, and within that we've got about 21, 22 different initiatives that we drive.
Okay.
So when you talk about enforcement agencies, yes, because when you talk about petty corruption, agencies are the ones that have the highest touch point with the Rakyat. So therefore, having initiatives around petty corruption and also around enforcement agencies is important.
Were you guys the one behind, important government departments now I see there's an integrity unit?
Yes.
So I went through it. I don't mind sharing this experience, because 2 days before the last Hari Raya, so there I was being a good citizen, checking everything, the tire pressure. Then I noticed that my road tax is about to end.
Yeah.
I'm not going back to my hometown, so might as well I do it now. Then waiting like a good citizen that I was at UTC's Pudu Central. By the time I reached there, then the guy looked at me and said, "Are you sure this is your car?" Then I said, "What?" Then he said, "Sorry," I said, "No, it's not your name anymore. But I've never sold my car." So then it started a slew of things that happened. Until now, I can't renew my road tax. I can buy insurance. Somebody, thank God you cannot find my address on any website, go in front of my house and take the car. I would have no recourse. And that's because in the system, somebody has duplicated that, abusing the system. So to me, my experience as a Malaysian citizen, that was the full brand of the bad thing about corruption, because if everything was in line, how could somebody go into the system and change the crowd without me allowing it to be changed? So I want to come from that aspect, because I think a lot of Malaysians, like you said, they see this touch point, they go through it, but sometimes you feel so hopeless, because we're just one person, and this is whole slew of big things that's happening. So what's the recourse?
Well, I mean, that's why you've got to be very careful about your IC, where it's being utilized, who's copying the IC. Yes, it happens within different agency systems. Systems can get corrupt. Not just the computer system being corrupt, it could be corrupted from the human touch point. So what we've done is actually we've put in integrity units in every government agency, including Pemandu, including JPM. We have integrity units that actually go in and identify areas or loopholes where the gaps that have to be filled.
And do they work as the firefighter also to an extent? Because the moment that happened to me, I never knew that there was an integrity unit, and I was sent there straight away. And the moment people want to send me to integrity unit, it's like, oh, it's like you know, if you in school, that's the
disciplinary unit. Yeah, no, but it actually works because it's like a quick firefighting force that can address immediate issues, at the same time also address longer term issues, right? All the gaps and loopholes.
From a system perspective, because I've also interviewed you know, people from Hong Kong, and they're fighting these two, and we look at them also sometimes. The thinking is, if you want to change things, because if it has already become ingrained, then when I go and make my complaint, it might be going through the system that I might have been suspect in the first place. But the moment you have Pemandu and you have this integrity unit, there is one other line that I'm sure of that wouldn't be spoiled.
Yeah, it's an independent line. Most integrity units also have a direct line to MACC. Right. They also work with the Auditor General's office. So in a sense, we've created a system whereby you have a parallel line to MACC. And maybe, you know, these individuals who are investigating your case may not have to just go through the JPJ system. They may actually then tap into MACC and say, look, you know, we found a bigger syndicate, right? We have had cases where, you know, car ownership has been duplicated and so on. So it is something that we have to address. It's not things that don't happen elsewhere, overseas as well. It happens everywhere, right? But we just need to make sure the integrity of the system is locked down.
Okay, cool. I have to go for the first break, but once we are back, I want to go back to the procurement side, because sometimes laymen, they don't really see this, but you know, corruption is like, if there's a honey pot, of course, people will want to get that honey. So corruption works that way too. If I have a 10 ringgit procurement tender, then maybe no one look at that most, but if it's billions. So how do you say that? Because the way I understand it, you know, like for big things in Malaysia, like MRT, everything, you have all these committees set up, and the member will have to come from a lot of people with safeguards to foresee and then implement and daily look at it. How does this increase the ease of doing business? Because remember, at the first insight, the moment we have e-procurement and everything else, is because when we make it shorter and easier, then the red tapes has been cut. Red tapes was one of the reasons why it gave a more easier route for people to take the corruption way. But now also, if we put on more mechanism, at the same time we're competing with other countries, you know, for deliveries and governance. So how do you make it efficient, but at the same time put in all these safeguards? Is what I think you can share with the audience, because the mindset should not just be that every time we want it to be stopped. We must understand that if we want to ensure that that doesn't happen, there are sacrifices to be made, because we have to do all these things, and that there must be people and system to it. That I want to discuss after this short break, because you might have experienced it, but you didn't see it coming from this side, and you just feel the outcome of it. Let's talk about that after this short break. You are still watching a special recorded session on the sideline of IACC for Agenda Awani, and you know, the focus on anti-corruption is all around the world, it's not just in this country. The good thing about that is there's a lot of lessons to be learned internationally on this, and I think at this conference there's a whole series of recorded episodes for Agenda Awani and Analysis Awani for you to know that. But here right now, I'm still with Ravindran Devagunam from Pemandu, and I guess the ball that I've laid out here is, fine, one car being cloned, what's the big deal? But, you know, if we talk about ensuring every citizen getting their due, so government spend a lot of money, and the next budget is coming up, so every time we talk about budget, people say, yeah, but I don't feel it. Correct. One of the reasons why someone might not feel it, because what should be due suddenly got siphoned off the other way. So maybe let's talk about the biggest elephant in the room. Big projects, you know, billions, procurement and stuff. How do you put in mechanism? Because at the same time, you want to make it not have corruption, but I don't want to be stuck in the jam waiting for that project to be delivered to me either. So how do you balance these two?
So as an example, we have the largest government spend, which is the MRT project, right? MRT is so large that we wanted to ensure that there is full integrity in the entire system running through. So we helped put in the entire Transparency International's integrity pact, okay, right? And they oversee every piece of procurement. We also then have had MACC, Auditor General, and Transparency International sit on an oversight committee that oversees every piece of procurement. So coming back to the point that you made earlier, you know, is this going to delay things? You got to think of it as a system, one system which is running in parallel, okay, right? Which is the actual procurement. You get the appropriate sign-offs and so on, and you go and procure. This is a parallel existence, right, that goes through the entire procurement process. So it's not any way impinging on the timing of the overall procurement, but it's probing and testing at every given point, right? So one, it's not meant to increase the time taken, but it's actually meant to address the integrity of the system. So it's like an audit process, you know, it's a parallel audit. It's not going to stop you, but it's parallelly auditing and making sure the system is running as it should.
So if it's a football game, it's not a referee, but it's the officials on the sideline looking at everything, every single pass, off the ball, on the ball, and everything else.
Yes. So it's virtually like that. It's not like a referee who's constantly stopping the game.
If there's some anomaly detected, then wouldn't they have to go in straight away?
They will go in. They will go in. They will pull up the files. The other activities will go on, but this particular activity will be pulled aside to say, let's review, right? So you rather delay and make sure that the integrity is there rather than just let it go and then try and deal with the integrity later on, right?
So are you now more worried about the lesser procurement contracts and tender? Because the biggest one will have all eyes on. But how do you cascade it down the lesser ones?
So what we've done is for every government contract, we now have integrity packs. So every contractor has got to sign an integrity pack. So that's very critical. You know, what the contractor is signing off is, I will not bribe to get this job, right? To make sure that there is integrity in the system. We've also got Ministry of Finance to agree to publish direct nego contracts. Right? After the fact, so for some strategic reason we have to go for the direct nego, fine. But after the fact, we put it on the website to say, here are the direct negos that have been awarded. So what we're trying to do is create more transparency in the system, right? Take out the magic and smoke and mirrors that could happen, but make sure that everyone understands how the system works, where the system goes, and how it's being monitored.
I wish it's all in one app on my phone, you know, if I want to check about MRT, then, but we'll talk about that maybe in the future. But I want to link it to awareness, because when there's a gap in perception and information flow, and I know for a fact that Pemandu does this all the time, there's monitoring of the quantification of result of deliveries, but there's also an understanding of monitoring the perception. Because I remember discussing the crime index going down by 20%, but the perception of crime going up. And Datuk Sri Idris Jalla was with me on that discussion. But how do you, for this one, for anti-corruption, how do you measure perception for and against? Because yes, the integrity pack and all might be running fine, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
the stakeholders, which are the people.
How do the people feel?
Yeah.
Right. So if you look at what we've done, so crime index is one thing, right? So it's real police cases that are being filed, or how we do well with education. It's you have a face of a child, but with corruption, it's all about perception.
Okay.
Right? So the only thing we could take, and I must say, we're the first government anywhere in the world to take a completely independent survey as our report card.
Okay.
Right. So we've got Transparency International CPI, Corruption Perception Index, which is an outside-in view on Malaysia and government's effort to fight corruption. 2, we've got the Global Corruption Barometer, which is an inside view. It's a survey of Malaysians of how they feel government is doing in terms of fighting corruption.
Okay.
Both of which are done independently by TI, Transparency International, right? And so we've adopted this as what we call True North for fighting corruption. So it looks at the perception issues, and for the perception issues coming to community awareness and how the community sees how this is being effective. Over the last couple of years, we've actually improved on how Malaysian community, as well as outside in view, so foreign community looking at Malaysia, how they perceive us to be.
Did you get any feedbacks? Sorry to interject, but this is the IACC, and this is one of the best places where all the people that should be here be talking about this.
The proof is really in, one, our corruption index has gone up.
Okay.
Right. Over the last few years, we have been improving on the corruption index. Second proof is we've had some of the largest inflow of funds, FDI, as well as domestic direct investment. So our Taukes being very confident in reinvesting in Malaysia, that's also gone up. So that's, in a sense, there is confidence in the integrity of the system, right? So from a perception-wise, you can look at the CPI. From reality is in terms of how much investment we are attracting, both from domestic investors as well as foreign investors. And that has been on the rise. So which is why, in a sense, what we do in fighting corruption and the economic transformation is tied together, because the more we can have integrity in the system and give confidence, the more people will come and invest, right? So I think part of the proof of the pudding is there, right? But as we talked about, community needs to understand that, fighting corruption is not done overnight. It's a process where you can put in building blocks. So these are the small building blocks that we've been putting in: specialized corruption courts, the integrity packs, right? Encouraging the private sector to come forward with integrity pledges so that they won't go ahead and offer a bribe to get a project.
I like the part where you end with the private sector, because that's where I want to go after this last break. Because if we look at cases around the world, football, for example, FIFA, I mean, the whole slew of litigation, legal aspect of it, let alone the accounting aspect, what hope does a layman, a poor man like me, for example, trying to understand all this? So maybe the awareness part also needs a bit of injection. And Pemandu, if you ask me, I'll vote for you guys to have more resources, just so that we can pick this out and, dissect certain sections for the people to understand. But while waiting for that, I want to straight away go to the private sector after this, because more and more the private sectors are the one leading the charge for the economy. Right. And that is also the strategy of our budget and all that. But looking around the world, it's also in the private sector where most of
the corruption
that we have to fight reside. So let's go to the last break and come back with that thought in mind. it's amazing when we talk about football, the word corruption will always come in. And right now, on the sideline of IACC, what's running and trending on Twitter is the fact that our Tigers, our Harimau Melaya, got hammered 10-0. And if you go to that timeline, the issue of governance and discussion on corruption, straight away there.
Yeah.
So I guess from one side, it's just using that simple dipstick survey of the social media. You can see that the awareness about corruption and performance and governance is already in the mind and the psyche of the people. Yeah. But how do we move it further? Because it's all related. If I go to Institute of Integrity, they'll say it's about a tree. And the roots must be formed when you are in school and university. But I also remember a very distinguished Vice-Chancellor of a university in the world, after the Vice-Chancellor's conference a few years ago, saying to me, yes, Kamara, we have failed. What do you mean we have failed? We, the Vice-Chancellors of the world, agree that we as a university looking at the problems of mankind, these are all our graduates. They're the one coming out from Ivy League universities. Yeah. And yet, when it comes to the issue of sustainability and integrity, they have failed miserably. So, if on the world scale is like that, how do we start again in this respect, in this country of ours, to finally lay, as you said, things has to be put in place, but they must be cemented together and they must be linked to the drive of the nation going forward, because we can't even afford 2 or 3% corruption, let alone more than that, because we want everybody to be helped.
I guess, society is very, very important in this aspect. There will be no taking if there is no giving, right? And I think society needs to stand up to the fact that, yeah, you can complain about a corrupt system, but you are part and parcel about that system. Okay. Until such time you as society stand up to say, no, this is how the system will work, and this is how I am willing to work through the system. Even if it's going to delay me by 2 days, fine. I will do it the way it should be done. And only such time will the taking then start receding as well.
But sometimes, just to be a devil's advocate, for once, the last segment, if I go back to subprime crisis, there's a lot of issues of integrity there. Yeah. The first bank that take the first loan, that allowed the first couple who are not really credit rated to take the 5th loan, and yet they knew it. And then they go to the next layer, produce this instrument of finance called CDOs and CDS, and then move them on to a bigger market, even internationally, and they sold it. How would somebody like me, not having that kind of background, really see it coming? Because there's already an issue of integrity the moment it's subprime, for example. So corruption has become more sophisticated.
It's become sophisticated. And it also exists in the most petty form as well.
Cool.
Right? So one, we've got to have confidence in our institutions. One, we've got to, like cases of you having a problem with JPJ where you try to get your registration done. Those things have to start receding. It's got to start stopping. So
and you're seeing it receding.
Yes.
From all the data.
All the data shows that it's receding. We have the integrity units working overdrive. So that's beginning to get addressed. 2, we've got to have our education system take on the responsibility of inculcating this into...
How do you think? So you're the best person to give that particular input. How do you think we should put that into our education system?
I think it's got to be fun. Yeah, it's
anti-corruption is fun.
You've got to make it fun. I mean, when I was growing up, we used to have civic lessons,
cool.
right? But the civic lessons were fun because of the stories around that, and how you relate those stories to real life, to your own life, right? So I think we got to make it fun.
Okay.
2, we've also taken on having dialogue sessions with our members of parliament. Right, where a lot of times it's in the grey.
Okay.
Right. So we've had multiple sessions with our members of parliament where we've talked about what is giving and what is taking.
So, for example, in the future, there's no excuse not to have an act regulating campaign and political finance funding.
There is no excuse.
I totally am with you on that. I wanted to ask a bit more about grand corruption, but that's all the time we have. I guess I'm giving you an open invite to go there, to be with me on the live show in Awani studio, and we can continue discussion, because I think you will agree that this discussion on anti-corruption will never end. As long as there's profit to be made, there's also this fight to be fought. So thank you so much for making time.
And I look forward to that.
This special session of Agenda Awani. Thanks so much to you for watching. I'm here on the sideline of the IACC, and I'm sure you have a lot of ideas to contribute. Hantarkan semua pandangan anda sendiri kepada pelbagai platform yang Astro Awani ada, di social media, Facebook, Instagram dan sebagainya, dan terus muat turun aplikasi Mudah Alih iOS dan Android, dan di Astro Awani kami sentiasa telus dan hanya integriti kami dan anda yang menjadi saksinya. Sekian, selamat malam, jumpa lagi. Thank you so much.
Thank you.